So people always ask me this question. They say, I want to get this car I've always wanted, but the car note is so high. So I thought about a great idea. How about if I rent this car out sometimes on Turo to offset the car note, to offset the expenses of insurance and car payments? What do you think of this idea? Honestly, like I always tell people, this is not a very good idea. It usually doesn't work out for multiple reasons, which we'll go over on this video, but there still is a way that you can get what you want, which is that vehicle, and not necessarily have to pay for it. You just have to be a little creative with it. So before I jump into different reasons why this usually doesn't work out, I just want to say it's not completely impossible. Some people still can pull this off if they can kind of get through these obstacles I'm about to mention. But let's talk about the first one. Most likely you're gonna have a sentimental attachment to this vehicle because, like you just said, this is your dream car, or it's a car you've always wanted. So once you get your hands on that car, you want to maintain it, you want to keep it clean, you want to keep the miles low, and all these things are opposite of the rental car business. People abuse cars that they rent. People will occasionally smoke in the cars, and even worse than smoking, people will have kids in the cars, and kids are always snacking, they're making a mess. Reason number two why this is most likely a bad idea is if you're relying on rental revenue to pay for the expenses of the vehicle, meaning car note and insurance. If you're relying on to rent the car to be able to afford it, then that means you can't afford it and you shouldn't do it. It's always a rule of thumb to have at least 6 months of revenue saved up for each vehicle, or you want to have at least 2 to 3 times of that monthly expense in disposable income coming in every month, income left over after you're done paying all your expenses. If you are getting this disposable income from a 9-to-5 job, then I would still much rather have the 6 months of revenue saved up, because anything can happen with your job and put that whole business model at risk. Now, why is it a good idea to have at least 6 months of revenue? Because let's say the car gets into an accident. It's not a total loss, but it's not the smallest accident either. Well, if you're waiting on the claim to go through to be able to afford fixing this vehicle, then you could be waiting a while. It could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. It just depends on how bad the damage is, who your claims rep is, how fast they're pushing the claim along, how aggressive you are when they're not moving it fast enough. So there's a lot of factors to go around. But let's say it does take a month before you get paid out. Well, now you don't have any money to pay for the expenses of the vehicle. You can't pay your car note, you can't pay the insurance. And even if you get the money after a month, you still have to take it to the shop, get it repaired before you could put it back on the platform to start making revenue again. So if you're dependent on that revenue and an accident happens, then that could put you at risk. And I do know people who miss car payments because of the same exact situation. Because if you miss a car payment or you have a late payment report on your credit profile, that could affect the next car note you try to get. And reason number 3 kind of ties into reason number 2, and that is recalls. What would you do if a recall happened and you're relying on this rental revenue to pay for the expenses? A recall could be issued at any time. It comes from the manufacturer, but legally you won't be able to rent the car out, and Turo will usually unlist the vehicle as soon as the recall hits, meaning that all your future reservations will be canceled and you won't be able to rent that car. Now, a lot of times you could just call the dealership and schedule a recall fix and they'll schedule you in, but there has been times where the manufacturer does not have a remedy for that recall yet, and they don't know when they'll release one. So a couple years ago, I had a few Nissan Altimas in my fleet, about 3 of them, and they issued out a recall, and this same exact thing happened to me. They didn't have a date when they was gonna issue out a fix for this recall, and I pretty much had 3 cars just sitting that wasn't making any revenue. So I pretty much jumped on it and sold the cars, liquidated all 3 of them, took that money and got other rental cars with it that could keep making money on the platform. Now, it might sound like an easy solution when you're like, okay, if a recall was to hit, I'll just turn around and sell the car real fast. Well, that's easier said than done. These cars I was liquidating were all, the most expensive Altima was about 11 to 12,000. It was a 2019, but the other ones were pretty cheap. I sold them for like 6,000, 5,000. They were older vehicles. Now, if you go out and finance a $40,000 car and you're gonna try to liquidate it, it's not gonna work out because the demand for a cheaper car is much higher than the demand for that $40,000 car. Not to mention, if you have the vehicle for a short period of time, you're pretty much getting slaved for depreciation, which I'm gonna tap into next. So if you sell the vehicle and let's say you bought it for $40,000 and you rented it out for 3 months, you've made whatever, 6,000 minus your expenses, so you only pocketed 4,000. So you bought it for 40, you pocketed 4,000, but now you go to sell the car and they say it's only worth 30,000. Well, that's $5,000-$6,000 that you actually owe, even though you're going to sell the car. So you're pretty much going to lose. This reason taps into the next reason, well, I'll mention, and that's depreciation. The newer vehicles that you're going to get to put on the platform, you're going to be getting killed from depreciation, at least for the first 5 years. That's why a lot of my vehicles that I purchase are 5 years old. If not, maybe I'll get them 3 to 4 years old, but then I'll have to buy them under value to account for depreciation. So cars depreciate the most within 5 years. So when you're buying this newer vehicle, you're renting it out, you're making revenue, but you also have to account for depreciation, especially if you're thinking about pulling the exit strategy or pulling the plug within 5 years. Usually it doesn't work out like that unless you're buying the vehicle for a much cheaper price than it's actually worth and account in for depreciation. And this could also hurt you if the vehicle was to get totaled out, because like I said, the actual cash value of the vehicle is going to drop significantly in the first 5 years. So let's say you buy a vehicle for 40,000, same example, you rented it out for 3-4 months, you made, $4,000 profit, the car gets to a total loss accident. Turo is not going to pay you what you owe for the car note. They're going to pay you the actual cash value. But let's say after these few months, the actual cash value is now 30,000, but you bought it for 40. You only pocketed 4,000. Well, there's still a $6,000 difference that has to be paid on this car note, and that's going to come from your pocket. Now, you can get gap insurance, but you're pretty much rolling the dice on the gap insurance because 99% of gap insurance out there are voided by commercial use. Meaning once you start renting this car out on the platform as a business, that voids your gap insurance. Now, there are times where the dealer or the gap insurance company doesn't know that you're renting the car out and they still pay you out that gap insurance. Well, consider yourself lucky if that happens. I just wouldn't put that in a strategy as a guarantee because it's not guaranteed. So like I mentioned at the start of the video, there still is a way to get what you want, which is that vehicle, and not have to pay for it necessarily. So let me elaborate. Now, if I was to do this, this is exactly what I would do. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad a few years ago for the first time, and there's something in that book that resonated with me. And he said, you should buy an asset to offset your liability. So that's exactly what you guys should do. You should buy a rental car that you're going to rent out on the platform to offset your expenses for your personal vehicle, not mix the two together. So for example, I have multiple vehicles on my fleet. Majority of my cars are cash cars that are already paid for with no expenses. And a lot of them I bought a few years ago when the car market was really low for $5,000, and I even have some as high as $10,000 or $15,000 on my fleet, and I do even have a $20,000 car on my fleet. But let's take the average price of the cash cars that I'm buying right now, which is $8,000. I would purchase an $8,000 car, rent that car on the platform, take the profit from that, which is $800, $1,000, just depends on your market. I would take the net profit from that vehicle and put it towards the car that I really want, and I would keep that car off the platform for multiple reasons that I just went over. So let's take one of my vehicles as example. Let's look at one of my Chevy Malibus. So these vehicles make anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month. So I could easily pay for a $40,000 car, even if it doesn't cover the complete total payment of the vehicle. I would only have to come out of pocket $200 or $300. Now, if I applied 2 of these vehicles to pay for the car that I wanted, then yes, I could 100% pull it off, and I'll still have extra money left over every month to put towards my next rental car. So that is the exact strategy I would take if I was to try to get a personal vehicle that I wanted to finance. Right now, I don't have a car note. I don't have any car payments. The vehicle that I use as my family vehicle is an older Infiniti QX56, and I have rented out on the platform sometimes, but I rented it with the understanding that any of these things could happen, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes I keep it off, sometimes I keep it on. When I do keep it on, I just make the rates higher to where it's worth it. If that vehicle doesn't bring any income in, then I don't owe any payments on it. I just got to pay my insurance, which at the end of the day is a business expense anyways, because I drive around with the vehicle back and forth to work. So I hope these things make sense to you guys. I hope that concept was easy to digest. So let me know down in the comments if you guys are thinking about doing this, if you're currently implementing any of these strategies, if you have a car that you're using for personal use and renting out, if this video changed your mind and swayed you against that, just let me know down in the comments. And of course, if you guys got any value out of this video, I would definitely appreciate a thumbs up, like button, smash it right now. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you like content like this, feel free to do that now. I do plan on posting on this channel a lot more than I have been. So stay tuned for the next video, and I'll catch you guys soon.